Unlike Fred, I never had to clean vomit off my table for my players.
And I quickly realized that that was way more work for what little payoff, if any, there was in the end. How prevalent or extravagant is food in your sessions? And I'm talking about the in-world food, not the snacks people bring. Let's start off with Fred.
Cool, blimey. All right, okay, sure, we can talk about that. I've got a boring answer, really boring. I don't really do very much with food nowadays. I used to in the past, but now I just don't. Maybe it's because of the group I'm playing with, and maybe it's just because I've kind of done a lot of stuff with food in the past. I'm like, okay, I've done that. Do I really want to do it again? And I find myself in that boat of, like, how many times can I have a dinner scene and make it so disgusting that I make my players vomit at the game table? I mean, like, that's once you've done it a few times, you kind of still feel bad, like maybe I shouldn't do that anymore. But I have done it, not recently, but do you remember Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom? There is a dinner scene, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, they can see you shaking your heads. Here we go. So there's a scene in there, right? It's pretty disgusting. It's a very funny scene, and so I decided I would duplicate this for a Star Wars campaign. This is a long time ago, and so they wound up in a banquet hall with some nobles, and what was being served, I served Rancor, I served Wampa, you name it. Every Star Wars creature that I could think of that what might be odd and strange and disgusting, have to include worms, because the snake scene in Indiana Jones Temple of Doom is like one of the best ones of all. So that had to be there. My players loved it. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't expecting it to take the entire session, which is exactly what they decided to make it into. So maybe that's a reason why I haven't tried to do that too often. Is maybe that you lean into it and they lean way into it. I've done that. I have included quite a few monster chefs, like various creatures who cook up various animal parts into meals in my games. Often they're traveling chefs, and they're often orcs, because I have a fixation, I have a problem. It's like an addiction to orcs and half orcs, particularly half orcs, because they're highly inappropriate. But that's sort of one of the things and my characters, a lot of my characters just eat everything. It's like roadkill. I live in New Zealand. I had a poor upbringing. I lived in the ghettos in Auckland, when there were ghettos. There aren't now, but there were. And so the only way I got to eat was like people would give you food. You know, we'd walk home with bananas with my brother. And when we couldn't live in the city anymore and we ended up in the country, my father had to go hunting. He was useless as a hunter. So he would run everything down with the car instead. Okay, so we'd have to eat his roadkill or something that he shot with a scattergun. And if you've eaten any animal that's been shot with a scattergun and the pellets, it's uneatable. But you still wind up with it on the table. It sucks. So I have included this this memory of mine, which still haunts me and my brothers and sisters. And that is the eating of barbecuing of various animals that we come across in the adventure when I'm playing a character. It's like, maybe it's not the dungeon master side of things, but that's sort of what I do. And I'm happy when my players like to do that and I'm dungeon mastering, because I would have been doing that anyway, so that's fine. It's caused me some trouble. I've eaten a few animals I wasn't supposed to, and that were actually very important to a story. But that's a story for another day.
Okay, well, unlike Fred, I never had to clean vomit off my table for my players. We never went there. And be honest, the group I play with primarily is a bunch of murder hobos. They're not that interested in food. They want to kill stuff. So for me, unless food is very central to the story for some reason, we kind of ignore it. And I think my group, now that this question came up, makes me think in general. For me, and like I said, unless it's very central to the story, we're trying to poison someone or they're going to some incredible feast that they're experiencing. Other than that, food is a very mundane aspect, and I feel like a lot of people when they play, they're trying to escape the mundane aspects of their lives. So I don't focus on food, going to the bathroom, getting holes in your socks, stuff that to me my players are like, I deal with that in real life. I don't want to deal with it in my fantasy world, right? My fantasy world, I don't go and kill shit. I want to rescue people. if they're playing an evil party, they want to do all the bad stuff. But no one wants to do the boring stuff, right? So unless the food, like Fred said, if you make some incredible feast and that's the scene and that's the story, then yes. Otherwise, food plays basically no part in my general campaigns, I would say.
So I as well don't usually have food as a big part of my campaign. However, with the group that I'm playing with right now, we've sort of had this, because we play a lot of Dark Heresy is our main system. And we've had this on and off pair of running jokes about the food, which is probably the most attention we paid to the food, which the first is just there's this brand that we made up of a type of ration bar, and the joke that there's no joke to it. It's just that everywhere you go, they just find it. Anytime that a food needs to be mentioned, oh, they're eating Sanguinius brand ration bar again. There's no joke to it. It's just funny because it just keeps happening, I guess. But then the other one we've got is that like the world building in Dark Heresy 2nd Edition is such that the main industrial planet of the setting, they're famous for their what do they call it? Their bile flies, which like vomit up very, very nutritious bile that gets converted into dozens of different types of food. So basically, those are the two things that come up in our games is either you're having a Sanguinius brand ration bar or you're eating some form of like a bile converted food.
Very similar to what Greg said. Usually food is more if it's going to be part of a story. I use scenes and inns where we have food being served, or if I provide a menu or something like that, then it's usually going to be for reasons other than did you like the boiled eggs and stuff like that. It's going to be more for I'm going to throw a quest hook in there. Maybe they want, I'd be like, okay, what does everybody want? Here's a menu, and then whatever they choose, one of them will choose like something with poultry or something like, oh yeah, sorry, we don't have any of that. There's our supply of poultry has been cut off, and we could really use a few people to go and see what's going on, kind of a thing. Or maybe they find like a gem in their soup or something like that, or maybe like a little vial that has some type of message, like an alphabet soup. They order that and it like spells out, help me, something. I don't know. I'm getting a little off track there, but so I'll use like restaurants and inns and things just to introduce NPCs that could go into quests, and sometimes I'll throw food in there to kind of like set the mood of the kind of place you're in. If they had any doubts that they're in a rough part of town with a bunch of people who didn't care, and they order the food and it's like really, really good, maybe that's like, okay, so what the heck's going on here? Or if it's really, really bad, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I use drinks more than I do food. I like to see what type of drinks people are choosing, whether it's an alcoholic drink, and how strong, or if they're going to go with something non-alcoholic. And of course, then there's always the reason for poison as well. I mean, if that's something that you want to do. But yeah, I guess I don't really use it a lot, just for introducing NPCs and quest hooks.
I think the collective wisdom here so far has been, nope, food's boring, don't do it. I found this out the hard way. I'm on the same page. When I started out, I would, go onto some website and say, randomly generate me a tavern menu for every single tavern in every city that I built. And I quickly realized that was way more work for what little payoff, if any, there was in the end. Like, oh, you get to choose from a menu, and the players would always just say, I have the house ale in the meal of the day, I don't care. So I learned real quick that it's pretty boring unless there's, a plot device you're using for it. So if I like to use food to show the players that they're in a strange place, to emphasize that more. Like, the city of Brass on the Plane of Fire isn't going to serve chicken and broccoli. They're going to do something weird and exotic, and it's going to be difficult for the players to figure out where they're going to have dinner, because they need to find something that's edible. the best food story that I came up with was an excellent plot point, at least my players thought so, where they were in a city and they were going to have a meeting with the leader of the rebellion, the big bad of the whole campaign. And they had an interaction with one of his minions earlier who was doing weird experiments on creatures, and he had created this sort of dragon manticore hybrid that the players had interacted with, and they saw the creatures escape. A couple sessions later, that creature showed up on a dinner plate while they were having a feast with both of these NPCs present. And it was a power move for the big bad to show the little guy, no, you do as I say, this was not sanctioned. And the players said that this guy's actually terrifying, and I think it was probably one of the best ways I've showed the players this villain's actually scary, don't mess with him. And of course, that's the point, they're gonna mess with him, that's the whole point of the game.
I actually had something I would add. I was thinking when you mentioned sort of the abyss and so forth, isn't there an abyssal chicken that they created for Avernus? So, I mean, I guess they would serve up, was it Cherokee abyssal chicken or something like that? You know, lots of herbs and spices on the side. I guess the other thing I found, it doesn't happen to you very often as a dungeon master or even as a player when you're playing in a group, but I have encountered it occurring from time to time, and that is somebody who gets fixated on the idea of being a cook without having to have some stupid cooking feat or chef feat to be able to do it. Like, you don't need to have a chef feat to be able to cook well. I mean, good Lord. But you do come across people who really like that idea, and so they insist on either the dungeon master coming up with recipes that they can find to add to their cookbook or something like that. And I always put it back on the players. I'm like, okay, so you want to be like a master chef and cook exotic foods and exotic animals along the way. Great. You're going to make up the recipes. So every time you decide you want to cook something, you can tell me what you put into the recipe rather than me. And so now, instead of me having to spend hours as a dungeon master coming up with some bizarre recipe for something that they are going to be able to find in game, they can just do all the work and write in their little notebook the recipe for whatever strange concoction they come up with, and force it back onto the players to use their brain, because they have a brain and the dungeon master has one, and there's like usually 4 or 5 brains that are not connected to the DM, and they need to use this as well. So that would be my advice, is when you get players who want to sort of be a cook, is always say, you have to make up your own recipes. This is like Master Chef. You don't get given a recipe, baby. You've got to figure it out yourself.
I would extend that even a little farther and just say that some of the only times when I've had like food come up in like taverns and stuff that I felt haven't just been a waste of time is not when I tell the players like what the tavern has. I just say, what do you order, and we'll go with that, because then it's player driven, all the food, and you don't have to waste your world building hours building insignificant things, but it still gets flavored in.
I actually currently play in a different campaign someone who has the chef feat, and I must say it is the worst level up decision I ever made. It's boring and useless, in my opinion.
Well, to me, the other thing that's bad about that stuff is that the other players don't want to hear about your damn recipes or your food in general. They want to play. They don't need you get 5 minutes of your own time dealing with food with the DM while they're sitting there doing nothing. I mean, it's bad enough when the rogue sneaks off by themselves, but to have someone cooking, wasting time, I don't think most players want to deal with that, really.
I almost have that happening in a Curse of Strahd that I'm a player in right now, where one of the players is really into cooking, and I'm a druid, so by the time he's handed out, or by the time he's got breakfast cooked every morning, everyone's already eaten a good berry.
I'm along the same lines as everyone else. I really don't want to include it, but I've considered having like a random chart in my DM binder just in case somebody's like, what's their special, whatever. I'll be like, I don't know, roll me a percentile die and I'll pick something. A couple of books for those of you that are kind of interested in exploring this that immediately come to mind is there's a cookbook. It's a real world cookbook called The Hero's Feast. I know there's plenty of reviews on YouTube and stuff. It's got some really cool ideas, and you can cook those in real life. But I mean, you could just use the names of stuff for your taverns or whatever. And then there's an author called Lore Smith that puts out a book called Remarkable Inns and also Remarkable Shops, and it has some really good random charts in there. So if you do want to, if you do plan on going to a tavern, you want to be able, you don't want to be caught off guard. You know, your players are going to ask what is there to drink or what is there to eat. Those are a couple really good books to check into, I think.
Hi, I am William SRD. I have a YouTube channel in which right now I'm mostly focused in playing and reviewing all of the worst Dungeons & Dragons video games.
Hey, I'm Greg. I'm a 3D printing pro on YouTube, and I specialize in printing 3D miniatures for use in Dungeons & Dragons and other war games.
Hi, my name is Fred Wheeler. I run the How to D&D YouTube channel. I do anything around players and dungeon masters playing Dungeons & Dragons, and I run classes live on the channel now.
Hey folks, Wally DM here. I have a YouTube channel that's focused on puzzles and traps, and I wrote a book about it. You can find it on DriveThruRPG.
If you are a viewer and you're meeting someone new for the first time, go check them out. I'll have all their links in the description.